I've always been driven by the belief that business is the most powerful vehicle of change we have at our disposal. And businesses in just about every sector are attracting customers because they successfully balance purpose and profit. Because they, like me, believe the world needs to transition to a kinder economy. And in a market where customers are making more informed decisions about how and where they spend their money, now more than ever, businesses must reevaluate what their license to operate really is. I'm Nick Hunter, CEO and founder of B Corp creative agency Paper Moose. And for years, I've been obsessed with navigating that perfect balance between purpose and profit. We call it the mucky middle. Welcome to my podcast, where I chat with successful business leaders about how they navigate the challenges that come with finding their own balance, and hopefully learn how to be a better and more conscious business owner along the way. Today I speak with Lucy Piper from WorkForClimate. Lucy's journey is far from typical, from making films and travelling the world to empowering everyday employees to chart a path to decarbonisation from within their organisations. Lucy is dedicated to helping businesses make meaningful change. I hope you enjoy the conversation. This is The Mucky Middle. Lucy, thank you for joining us in The Mucky Middle.
It's a pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me.
I guess I always start these interviews around, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, wow. Haven't been asked that question for a really long time, but I have a very clear answer. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I felt like it was my calling, and went down that pathway for some years and was a film camera technician. I used to work for a company called Panavision, and I learned how to kind of set up, run, fix all of these movie cameras, 16mm, 35mm. I was a clapper loader on movies and commercials and that kind of thing. And then the world changed and everything went digital, and everything that I learned, not everything that I learned, but a lot of what I learned became irrelevant, which was interesting. And I didn't become a filmmaker, but maybe so one day.
You then you're also a brand person like myself. Tell me about your kind of evolution to where you are today.
So I moved from the UK to Australia, and it was around this time of kind of the digital transformation of the film industry, and Australia was a really different region to try and get work in. And so I thought, okay, I want to change my career. I want to see what else I'm capable of doing. I did something called award school in Melbourne back in like 2009, I think it was. And I started working in advertising. And that was really where I began to learn about brand storytelling, really. And I was lucky enough to get a job at a B Corp travel company. They weren't a B Corp at the time, but I started working for Intrepid Travel and spent just under 10 years there building an in-house creative department, and was able to travel the world, making films, telling stories, meeting the amazing communities that the Intrepid Travelers got to visit. So yeah, that was kind of that transition from wanting to be a filmmaker into advertising, brand storytelling.
And making films as an advertiser.
Exactly. And
We're all storytellers, aren't we?
Yeah, I guess that's the theme that is, or the thread that goes through all of those different things. But you can only really see it with hindsight. And when you're in job changes and career transitions, it's really confusing and unsettling at the time. It's hard, but for any of your younger listeners, I want to say that when you look back on the changes that you make, I promise they will make sense.
Yeah, strangely. Yeah, I started as an actor and now a founder of an advertising agency. So it's a strange journey, but it all kind of makes sense when you look backwards.
How do you find your acting background resonates with the work that you're doing now?
I guess I always think about it as, I always used to love stepping into the shoes of characters and trying to understand what made them make one decision versus another. And I think about that with the brands that we work with, of why does a customer choose one brand versus another? What are the things that we can do to sort of help them make a better choice, change their behavior? So I guess I use that element, trying to really put myself in the shoes of our our customers and trying to think about it in that way.
That's such a powerful insight.
Or I've just gone full method on being a CEO and just I can't get out of the character anymore.
Love that, Nick.
And was it at Intrepid that you sort of got the climate, I guess, making a difference in the world itch?
Yeah, working at Intrepid certainly taught me about the capability that business has to be a force for good. It wasn't something that I had considered, but very early on joining that organization, it is, to stick with the acting analogy, it is downstage center. Like it is core to everything that they're doing. And it just becomes a part of the way that you're thinking about business strategy, everything that you're doing. And so the purpose of a company was kind of revealed to me as this lever for driving change in the world. And at the same time, there were certainly elements of climate that came into that. I mean, at Intrepid, they are considering impact in many dimensions, whether that be kind of sustainability of communities that they visit or the carbon footprint of their trips. They're considering broad impact measures, but at the same time, I was starting to tune in more to the climate crisis and what was happening in the world. And we were doing a lot of stuff at Intrepid around climate, and Daryl Wade and Jeff Manchester, the co-founders, talked about it a lot. Daryl had been a part of the Al Gore climate leadership reality training. And so there was lots of discourse around climate and around our role in reducing emissions and lobbying the broader travel industry to take action. So I felt like I had enough of an understanding of the role that business plays in the climate crisis and reducing emissions to be able to enter into that arena as a non-climate expert. And it was in 2020 that really prompted my move out of brand and advertising and storytelling into the climate movement. I thought, okay, this is the point in time where if I'm not dedicating my time and my skills to proactively working on solutions, what am I doing?
And that's kind of the core of the organization that you're currently at. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So I run a program called WorkForClimate.org. That's where you'll find us. We're an NGO, a not-for-profit, and we are basically trying to work with employees and professionals on the inside of companies to help them influence their business from the inside. So we try to work with employees on the inside of companies to help them drive change from within and to influence the decision makers, if you like, to really accelerate climate ambition. So we've built a platform and a community. We basically create content that helps people drive change in their companies. We run courses that help people drive change in their companies, and we've created a community space, a community of practice to help people drive change in their companies. Because I think something significant that I learned whilst I was at Intrepid, and that is core to the work that WorkForClimate is trying to do, is the fact that corporations, companies don't make decisions. It's people who make decisions. People create companies, people run companies, and it's people who ultimately can change companies. And those people, when they are decision makers, they are just the same as you and I, and they are making decisions based on a variety of factors at any one time, and they can be influenced to make different decisions. And so what we're really trying to do with WorkForClimate is make sure that the companies that really, really need to transform the way they're doing business, and I'm thinking of your kind of like large listed companies, those household name brands that really are contributing to a lot of carbon emissions in Australia and globally, those kind of companies, they need to make different decisions. And it is much easier for business leaders to make decisions that are progressive towards like climate, and they're more ambitious with their climate goals. It's easier for them to make decisions if they have employees who are helping with the business case, trying to figure out what does it mean for them in terms of their strategy if they have to decarbonize their business like 7% year on year for the next 5 years, if we are going to be on a realistic pathway to net zero 2050. Like, decision makers need their staff as much as they need kind of external pressure and regulation and consumer choices. Employees are a really critical factor. And so that's why we created this platform, and we try and find employees and help them drive change from within.
And how do you do that? Are you educating them and kind of guiding them and trying to giving them the tools to help make that change internally?
Yeah, pretty much. I think you've summed it up really well there, Nick. We think that change happens in this space with climate in almost in two ways. There's one factor, one pillar, which is the technical things that need to happen on the inside of a business. And you have sustainability teams, you have experts that can figure out a lot of the things that need to happen. Like, they can work on the goals, those sustainability professionals. But then you have the other side that is not technical. It's more a leadership piece. It's how do you engage and mobilize an entire workforce behind those very technical sustainability initiatives. So what we do is we teach people the basics in that technical stream. So here's enough knowledge to make you feel confident and capable in engaging with topics that you might feel like, oh, that's out of my lane, that's too technical, I'm not a climate expert. It's cool, you don't need to be a climate expert. Here are the big picture concepts that you'll need to understand. But basically, we need you to take those through your organization and influence everyone to be thinking about, how are we going to decarbonize our business? What does that mean for me in my role, for my team, for my budget line that I'm in charge of? Like, what does that actually mean? Sustainability teams can't do that on their own. I mean, I think if we were going to get to where we need to get to, if we stand a chance of, like I say, a net zero by 2050 goal, which is like the agreed standard that we need to achieve, if we're going to get there, what that means is at least 7% year on year emissions reductions. And if you think of that over the next 5 years until 2030, what that means for a business in practical terms, if we leave it up to sustainability experts alone, is that those sustainability teams, they would need to be given the investment and the mandate equivalent to product, UX, UI, sales, innovation. Like, they need that level of investment and mandate from their companies. And I can't imagine that happening across many, many industries over the coming 18 months to 2 years. So we need to engage the entire workforce. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I guess you have, pressure coming from customers, pressure coming from procurement, and then also pressure coming from internally within businesses, and then hopefully that is kind of the the perfect trifecta of actually getting some of these leadership teams to actually do what is necessary.
Totally. But it's a wicked problem, and it's a very challenging problem for a business whose sole reason for existing is to drive profit and growth. And so how they bring that purpose into their core business strategy is like the challenge of the moment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, I run an advertising agency, and our reason to exist is to get consumers to buy more things. And I hate the word consume, but to try and get customers to choose our products over others, and trying to find that balance in the decisions that we make, and doing things ethically. is a really interesting thing for us to discuss, as a team. And obviously the choice of types of clients that we work with is key to that. And so obviously we have a series of no-go lists, and we're a B Corp, so we're always sort of trying to, we exist to create a world where the good organizations reign supreme. So we want to try and fuel their growth.
I
But
love that.
it is a bit of a mucky, like this. That's why I've called this the mucky middle, because it is about trying to find our way through the grey area and finding the balance between doing the right thing while also ensuring that we are still gainfully employing our team and paying our tax and doing all these things that business needs to do to exist, while also doing good in the world.
I love that, Nick. And especially going back to what you said before, that concept of enacting, like making decisions, and you're doing the same thing as a CEO and as a team, where you are being conscious and intentional about the decisions of maybe it's who you do business with, or you mentioned something. I call it an elephant, and naming an elephant. I went and spoke at an advertising agency last week, and one of the slides we talked about was these two elephants, and one that you just named is that the more products we advertise, the more people buy them, the more stuff gets made, the more emissions are created. That is the elephant when it comes to advertising, communications. If we're not being intentional, and if we're not being conscious about the decisions around the businesses that we choose to work with and for, why does that business exist, and how are they evolving into the future? And I think excited is not the right word. I try to remain positive about the time that we've been born into, and the fact that we are part of this
Transition.
And this challenge that we share as human beings all around the world, and we are able to be a part of a moment in time where we are changing the course of history. We are being intentional. We are consciously making these decisions. It's a privilege, and it keeps me motivated in doing this work, when it would be so much easier just to go back and just be like live a normal life and do the normal thing. It would be so much easier. But we are here, and we are part of this generation who are changing the future, making decisions about who you're working with, how is that business evolving. Businesses don't need to end, but they do need to evolve. And I think that being a part of, like you mentioned previously, the B Corp community, and those really intentional spaces of businesses that acknowledge we need to make money, we need to create meaningful employment for people so that our communities can thrive. But how do we balance that with our purpose?
And I think there was an interesting concept that I heard last week at the B Corp retreat, where some Indigenous companies were talking about a 100-year business plan. And I thought it was such a beautiful concept to, rather than thinking about a 3 to 5 year business plan, but thinking about a 100-year business plan of what will be left, what will people look back at us in that time? Will we still exist? Do we need to still exist in that period? Like maybe we've made ourselves redundant, and that's potentially a good thing. Looking at that kind of philosophy of business is really interesting.
I love the concept of looking to a longer horizon when the challenge before you is so overwhelming, to look beyond. And there's a level of acceptance around the fact that, like, if we're just talking about the climate crisis, things are very bad. But longer term systems transformation, what will that look like, and what will it take? Holding in our minds the fact that we do have this very urgent scenario that needs to be addressed. We do need to stop the expansion of fossil fuels. We do need to stop the culture of hyperconsumption that is kind of overtaking developed economies. But the longer term systems transformation, you can feel it happening in certain spaces, and And that's not necessarily going to mitigate the emergency that we're in, but it does give me hope for the future.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to. I mean, yes, it's incredibly stressful, and I am in total despair at points, but I think it is a really exciting time for us to think about that we will witness this transition, and we will be the generation that does that, and hopefully undoes some of the bad things that the previous generations have, unwittingly or wittingly done. And I think about, my kids and what kind of world that they're going to grow up in. And that's kind of what drives me, and making sure that the decisions I make are playing into a world that they're going to grow up into as well.
How old are your kids, Nick?
3.5 and 1.5. So I'm in the thick of it.
Yeah, you are. My son is 5.5 and is starting to reach that point where he talks about the planet and the environment and things that he's learning at school. And so I am navigating how I talk about it with him and trying to be that super hopeful, positive voice of, yeah, this is a challenge, and all of it, we get to come together with all of these people around the world and figure out a bunch of exciting ways to solve a bunch of really big problems and challenges, but it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. But I mean, as creative people, we love solving wicked problems. So if that is how we can sort of lend our powers to good, then great. That's kind of an exciting proposition. I guess tell me a little bit about, like, what have you seen in terms of employees making change within the companies? Do you try and work with employees in very particular sectors? Are you trying to go for, I guess, companies that are less good? Like, are you trying to get more into those tents, or what is the theory of change?
Yeah, so basically, if you think about, this is a very oversimplified analogy, but I went to an event last week, which was the launch of TerraDo. They're kind of like a very good friends with us. They are running climate literacy training. Highly recommend. We've partnered with them on a number of occasions, and we're in the same kind of Boundless Epic. So we're both getting funding from Boundless Earth, which is really exciting. But someone at the launch event said to me, what's the difference between the courses and the content that TerraDo create and the courses and the content that WorkForClimate create? And I tried to explain it as simply as I could, which was, we have one side which is like putting your foot on the accelerator. We need to accelerate climate solutions, like all of the innovations, the technology, the clean energy transition. We need to accelerate that. There's not enough people qualified to staff a workforce, the workforce that is required to build the infrastructure that we need around the world. We need to accelerate that. So you've got this one side which is putting your foot on the accelerator of the clean energy transition. Then you have the other side, which is that clean energy transition can happen, but if corporate power remains unchecked and emissions just go up and up and up, it's not going to make any difference how much we accelerate the clean transition. So the other side is applying a brake. So WorkForClimate is more about figuring out how do we pump the brakes inside the companies that can have the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time on climate. So we are actively trying to work with employees who are inside of those companies. We call them the movable middle. So we're not trying to work with the companies who are already doing great things. Like, we're not seeking out people inside like Tesla or Atlassian or those really progressive on climate businesses. Yep. We are also not trying to actively work with employees who are like in the pure play fossil fuel or energy sector. They're not going to change. They actually need to figure out how they're going to decommission. That's a very different challenge that they are trying to solve. The movable middle are the companies who are your household names, maybe they're big tech. They're the companies who currently think we actually don't have any skin in the game here. We're not necessarily benefiting from the clean energy transition, and we're not doing anything really, really bad. However, they're core contributors to our global carbon emissions. Like over 70% come from the corporate sector around the world. So we try to work with employees who are inside large or listed companies, and we help them sort of build communities of practice within their companies and get them working on the most simple but significant climate goals inside of their corporation. In saying that, Work for Climate exists for all employees. So we get lots of people from SMEs or from B Corps, people who actually just want to absorb the knowledge and then take that away into their business to help them refine what they're already doing. Maybe they've already got a mandate, they already have very ambitious climate goals, but they're able to utilize some of the technical skills that they learn from the Work for Climate content.
And what do you find is kind of like the key success, like what makes an advocate within a business really successful versus one that isn't? Do you see sort of things that are, like, is it the storytelling capability of like how to actually sell it in and understand both sides of the argument and understanding how we can transition while also still making a profit? Like it doesn't necessarily need to, it doesn't need to change the bottom line of the business, and can actually sort of increase the profits in sometimes.
We hosted a webinar yesterday, and there were 3 climate entrepreneurs, as we call them. So people who are working inside of business to drive climate ambition. And all 3 of them were asked a similar question, and they all answered, even though they had very different approaches to change. Some were more in that storytelling space and were very good at influencing decision makers based on how they framed the narrative of like the corporate identity. One's very experienced at building sustainability communities to build power internally and then have those groups used as a resource. And one was very good at the technical, strategic kind of planning and figuring out what it was really going to look like. All 3 of them agreed that tenacity was the thing. It's like you're going to get told no. You're going to get told no again. You're going to get told no. And even when you get told yes, the actual change that you're advocating for is going to take way longer than you anticipate. So you need to be tenacious and stick with this work. It is not like a fast win scenario. And because of that, they all agreed that celebrating momentum is really important, and celebrating small wins is really important to help you stay on track, stay tenacious, and stick with this work, because it is hard. These are really, really hard problems to solve inside of businesses, and there is so much resistance for a myriad of reasons.
It would be very easy to be demoralized and kind of give up, but I guess that is not the challenge that's been set for us.
Yeah, it is demoralizing.
Yeah, it's tiring to always be continuously pedaling, but no one's picking up on what. At least for like the last 30 years, we've been discussing the problems rather than acknowledging that it exists and then figuring out what to do. I think we're just at the point where people have come around to the fact that okay, yes, we do have a problem ahead of us, but it's a little bit late, and so now we're trying to play catch up, which is such a massive task. So it is
huge.
That's great advice to sort of take the wins, figure out how you can build that momentum.
Yeah, take the wins.
And I guess surround yourself by other people within the business.
Yeah, surrounding yourself. That's exactly what I was just going to say, was that was really the reason we felt building a community of practice was important for people across different companies and across different industries to come together so that they feel like they're not alone, to recognize, there are a bunch of other people all around the world. This is a movement of people who are not prepared to leave their concerns at the front door when they walk into the office. There is now a space for people to come together and to share wins, share frustrations and just share the sense that work is happening. We are making progress. It doesn't look how we want it to look, but it's happening.
Can you tell me about any, are there any public wins that you could tell me, or like stories that are maybe made anonymous via the company, but any kind of insight as to the things that you've seen actually make a change?
Well, we have a few really compelling stories from the Work4Climate community, and one of them we've kind of made a short film about. It's a really beautiful story about a woman called Laura who was working at Specialized, the cycling manufacturer, and the changes that she was able to advocate for and drive throughout the business and really become an advocate for climate and sustainability at a much higher level because of the tools and the strategies that she was learning from the Work4Climate Academy and that community. So I encourage you to go and check that out. It is on our website if you want to take a look. And that's me, like the marketer in me coming out there. But I mean, we talk to employees all day long, every day. We are having conversations, and the wins, as I recognize them, would not necessarily seem like they're not going to be hitting news shelves or anything like that. People aren't going to write about them. But when you hear about the bravery and the conversations that employees inside big companies, like think of the first big tech company that comes to mind, and I guarantee you we're talking to employees who are working on these climate initiatives internally, and they're doing really great things. For example, advocating for climate safe retirement and superannuation funds, which is on a surface level sounds really boring, but it is like there is so much impact potential in the retirement fund that a company has. So like in Australia, default superannuation funds, I think it's about 3 trillion
It's 3
Australian
trillion. Yeah.
dollars and that's a default fund. So when you have a single employee inside a company who advocates to either the CFO or HR or whoever manages the employee benefits and gets the default superannuation fund divested from fossil fuels and deforestation, that is a massive, massive win. And we're working with employees all around the world. So in Australia, it's fairly straightforward because you can switch funds. In the US, it's a little bit more tricky. And we have employees who are pushing their companies to then push their asset manager, be they BlackRock or Vanguard, to create climate safe retirement options for their employees. It's such a big deal, and there is definitely momentum there. And once one employee in one company hears about another employee in another company, they get that idea, they get sparked by it, and then they go away and they do the same thing inside their company, and it really turns into something much bigger.
Now you're preaching to the converted. One of our clients is Australian Ethical. So no, it's really interesting. Do you find that is everything global now? Are all the things that you're seeing with employees internally in businesses, are they the same, or are they different nuances?
It's quite different culturally in terms of corporate culture.
Yep.
So we work predominantly across Australia, Europe, and the US. And the level of psychological safety and real safety for employees inside companies is really different. In Australia, employees, and I think it's to do with the culture here, they generally have more access to senior leaders or people with influence. They have access, but they may not have influence. But they have access, and depending on the industry and the particular business, there is a higher level of psychological safety on the whole, broad strokes, than there is in the US, where things maybe need to be more discreet, or they fear layoffs, and it's just a little bit different. And then the
workers'
UK
rights are
falls
slightly
in between.
looser, aren't they, over there? Yeah.
But yeah, so culturally,
So there's more
it's
fear
different
internally
across regions.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and obviously the ecosystem's changing a lot and will change a lot in the next couple of years in the States. I guess what is kind of the company's view of like what is the role of business today?
Well, our sort of position on that is that business is the only lever that can ultimately turn things around when we're talking about climate in the next 5 to 10 years. Like businesses have the ability to move resources, people. They can just make things happen very quickly. So
In
something
comparison to
that,
governments that are
well,
slow
yeah,
and
you
don't
read my mind.
Yeah, like
You read my mind. We've got like we talk about, and I can't remember. I'll have to email it to you so you can put it in the notes so it's cited properly. The triangle of inaction, and the idea you have governments, you have the corporate sector, and you have civilians, civil population, and everyone's kind of looking at each other going, well, we can't solve it. Well, we can't solve it. Well, we can't solve it. There is a role for each point of the triangle to play, but we actually see that business has the control over governments. So corporations shape government policy around the world. So we teach employees about how to get their companies lobbying for climate policy, which is literally the most important thing that they can do aside from reducing their own emissions. We see that the corporate sector, they're in control of everything. If the corporate sector doesn't change, it doesn't matter what governments are saying and what individuals are doing. We are seeing corporate overreach, and the fact that because they are global and they're avoiding regulation and they're avoiding taxation in specific jurisdictions, we're seeing these loopholes. And if we're thinking purely about emissions of corporations and the measurement of emissions and the greenwashing of corporate action, you can just see that the corporate sector is the critical point at which we can make a difference, really. That's kind of how we think about business.
Yeah, it makes sense. And obviously we work with government as well as commercial entities. But in terms of capital and being able to move quickly, I totally agree. And I guess in terms of, let's chat about greenwashing, because we've obviously had greenwashing, green hushing. There's all of these things that are going on in purpose-driven brands, and even the word purpose, is that the right thing that we should be using now? I'm thinking more around social license. What's my license to operate? What's your take on that?
I think that corporate greenwash is maybe the biggest threat to us achieving real emissions reduction in the next 10 to 15 years. And that customers, employees get a sense from certain businesses that, I can engage with this business, or I can work for this business because we've got XYZ goal. But the reality is, and the first climate integrity report got released a couple of weeks ago in Australia, that shows you have all of these commitments from all of these companies. And let's just talk about Australia, but I believe the pattern is the same around the world if you're looking at the net zero integrity. All these companies with commitments, and none of them are moving the needle at all. And they are really talking about their commitments, but commitments do not equal action. But a funny thing happens when we hear about the commitments. And I'm guilty of this. We're all guilty of it. You hear it and you're sedated by that message. You're like, okay, it's fine. They've got it under control. It's fine. They're going to be at net zero by 2050. It's fine. Everything's fine. Like the house on fire meme. It's fine. Everything's fine. They've got a net zero commitment. And so I believe that the greenwashing is almost forcing us into this state of thinking like future us will deal with it.
Yeah.
That's what greenwashing does. It's stopping us from taking action now.
What about, so a lot of our clients are carbon neutral, and carbon credits have also been widely criticized, and just trust as a customer, how can I trust that what a business is doing right. And it is super murky as to try and find out that the one source of truth of, no, this company's doing it right. They're offsetting it in the right way. They're not doing anything shady in the background and buying 3 trees that have already been bought 6 times over. Is it government's role to come in at this point?
I think there's almost a step before that, which is going to sort of like the basic maths of it all. I think there's something like there's not enough land mass that exists on our planet to grow enough trees to offset all of our emissions. So if you just take that as the basic first principle when we're thinking about offsets, and I'm not going to cast judgment on whether an offset program is good or bad. Let's make the assumption that every offset program is 100% good and works. Okay, I'll make that assumption. Great. The kind of first principles thinking when you're looking at companies who are offsetting is more for me around what attempts are they making to reduce their emissions before they're offsetting. Because if they're not reducing their emissions, offsetting, like the maths will never ever add up for us. And so it's great. Exactly.
You're literally kicking the ball down the road.
Yeah, and so as a consumer, I think you don't actually have to understand heaps about offsets. Offsets are a financial product. That's all you need to know. It's a financial product. I don't care that you're offsetting. Great. I want to know, how are you evolving your business? Because right now, if your business is contributing to X emissions, I want to see you reducing that year on year. I want to see how you're transforming and evolving your business.
I think that's the one good thing, is that it is making everyone measure it, but I guess the next step is to now reduce it, not just offset, because that's kind of going to be the hygiene factor. Yeah.
A better metaphor is the bathtub, right? And the water in from a tap and the water out from the plug, and that dynamic equilibrium of the water. Like, we know whether we're putting water in or whether we're taking water out. Is your company putting more emissions into the atmosphere than it's taking out? Like, it's basic.
And can I jump now to, I guess, brand? You started as a filmmaker, you became a brand person, and now you're in climate. I guess, what is the role of brand and brands to help change the crisis?
I see the role of brand, and this is both, like, so I'll go internal. So imagine we're working inside of a company, or you're an ad agency, a comms agency. I see the power of brand is that it can almost short circuit some of the resistance internally to taking action, because a company's brand, its DNA, its origin story, who it is, that holds the blueprint, if you like, of how we can write climate and transformation into that company's story. You can do it through the brand. And so if we're working with employees who are in an ad agency or a brand agency, for example, we'll talk to them about, when you're engaging with that company, put their brand DNA at the front of everything and tie climate outcomes into that. Like, what is it about their brand? Because nobody has a brand that talks about destroying humanity or the planet that we live on. Everybody has a brand that talks about the kind of things that we value, the shared beliefs that we have as human beings. So writing climate into brand is the way that we can kind of convince companies to change faster. And then on the outside of the company, if you're a consumer, brands really shape the cultural context in a lot of ways. So I think that there is massive power in what brands say and do around climate.
And I guess the trick is just making sure that it's authentically aligned all the way through the business as well. So it's not just on that brand level. Otherwise we get into that greenwashing.
I think that's kind of what I mean. That's kind of what I mean. It's like, use the brand to transform the company, because the brand is who they are, what they care about, what they stand for, and why they exist. And that will always be tied to those human values, and a healthy planet is kind of
Good for all.
connected to that. So the brand almost gives you that mandate to transform the company. It's if you're an employee on the inside, you can always point back to the brand and say, this is why we were created as a company. And going back to what you said about what a company looks like 100 years from now, that is a really powerful thing for an individual in a company to do. It's like, this is why we were created. This is what we should be looking like 100 years from now. And to become that, to maintain that kind of vision, we need to make these changes now. Otherwise, we're going to be on the wrong side of history. We're not going to exist in 100 years from now.
Yeah. What would you describe as your most favorite thing that you've done while you've been at WorkForClimate?
Wow. I think my most favorite thing is an ongoing process, a transformation of the way it is possible to be and to show up in the workplace, and just learning from a cross section of other employees and our own team members about how we can do things differently, and that the processes and structures of the past are not the ones that are going to guide us into the future that we need to move into. And I'm talking about everything to do with kind of the systems change that people in our communities certainly want to be a part of and want to see happening. But this concept of how we get there is the destination is something that as a team we're talking about a lot, and that replicating kind of the capitalist structures that have led us up to this point, that's not going to get us into the future that we need to be. And that how we move on in our daily work, how we talk to each other and think about the work that we're doing, how we achieve the thing is the thing. Having that mindset shift has probably been the biggest, most positive thing for me.
Interesting. And I guess what sort of advice would you give yourself looking back as the aspirational filmmaker?
What advice? Jeepers. I'm going to have to think about that for a second.
If you could talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
Stay in law school. No. I'm not sure that's really the advice I would give to myself. Everything is about people. Everything is relational, and the way that you treat people, and it's all about people. It's all relational. Be kind, be open, and trust people. That then it doesn't matter what job you're doing, what organization you're within, or what industry you're a part of, you're going to be making a positive impact.
That's really lovely. I guess that's kind of WorkForClimate. You know, you're encouraging people to bring their personal values into a business that is made up of people and create change from the inside out, because if you can create that ripple effect within a business is made up of people, and the values are often tied to those people. So if you can make that change with just that one person.
I love that, Nick.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I love that.
That's awesome, Lucy. Well, thanks so much for jumping on. I guess I'll encourage everyone to jump online, look at the website, and what can they do? They can sign up. What
Come
can
along and
employees
join
do?
the community. Yeah, join the community at workforclimate.org. It's free to join. There are a bunch of incredible resources in there. But I encourage you, sign up for the newsletter. It is, we often get emails from people saying, this is the best newsletter I get all week, and I look forward to opening it. So there you go. That's my last request.
Awesome. I'll tell my team to sign up. Well, thanks so much, Lucy, for joining us
Love it.
At the Monkey Middle.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you everyone for listening to The Mucky Middle. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed having the conversation. And if you did, then drop us a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening. We'll see you next month for another episode, but in the meantime, we hope you'll keep walking that fine line between profit and our planet.
The Mucky Middle is a Paper Moose production. Music by Caleb Jacobs.